Ever since the release of DUSK, I've been following New Blood Interactive, a publishing studio that has garnered a lot of traction over the years thanks to their titles that scream nothing but quality. Games like DUSK, Amid Evil and Faith have been brought up by the creative talents of their respective developers, and New Blood have helped bring these amazing games into the fold, allowing many like me to enjoy them. But at this juncture, there's been one that they've published that I believe stands out from the rest of them. Something that could be considered the peak of the boomer shooter trend, and the most stylish and dynamic shooter I've played in years. Ultrakill is a game developed and made by RC Patala, also known as Hikita, that takes the style feedback of Devil May Cry and blends it with the fast-paced gunplay of Quake and Doom Eternal. From the very beginning, I was hooked on this game, with its beautiful blend of drum and bass and metal, the most versatile movement in any shooter I've ever seen, and an incredible number of combo possibilities that dwarfs even Doom Eternal. The game is incredibly fast, but it envelops you into this trance of stylized combat that, naturally speaking, you match its speed every time, and most of the time it never feels like I'm sweating either. Of course, you can get overwhelmed by street cleaners or beamed by a malicious face or a virtue if you're not watching for them, but it really just boils down to human error, rather than the game's mechanisms making you feel like it's the game's fault. Even with the game's continual development, it feels like there's so much more that can be added to this game, even with it being close to complete. And that's not talking about the eventual Act 3 either, or the release of the map editor that's coming out at some point. The potential for this game is frankly limitless. Its story, while incomplete, does have a pretty interesting premise, and is rather ambiguous, considering the sinister nature of our main character, that is powered by the blood of others. In other words, you literally keep yourself alive through murder, which is where the blood mechanic comes in during the gameplay, where you heal yourself by getting close and absorbing the enemy's blood. The enemy designs are a mix of demonic, angelic, and machine foes that inhabit each and every layer. As you progress through the layers, you do begin picking up the pieces to its story, but it's hidden behind books that you can find. They provide cryptic but insightful info about the game's universe and what's going on exactly. The layers have a similar structure in regards to their progression, but each level feels unique in its presentation, and usually will have its own quirks or ways of going about the level. The game is also full of secrets, ranging from books that give you the lore, secret encounters, or even new levels that are not only separate but are also completely different from each other. You have one that's a cat and mouse game in the dark, one that's a sequence of puzzles, and another that's a visual novel. It's a nice break from the levels, and shows that the developer had a lot of fun making this game, so much so that rather than just making a secret level like in the Doom games, why not have fun with it and go out of its conventions, offering something new for each secret level. Ultrakill provides its own endless mode called the Cyber Grind. You can customize the map to your liking through the options terminal, from patterns to the look of the grid, and the waves of enemies as well. It's what you'd expect from an endless mode, fighting waves of enemies until you die or until you've had enough. If I don't feel like clearing a layer and just want to zone out, then I just do the Cyber Grind. It's a lot of fun, and is a great way to practice combos and weapon swapping, as well as finding the most efficient ways to kill an enemy. This is something I wish Doom Eternal had at least, as an option, an alternative to its Horde mode. I like the V1 character. I like the indifferent nature to his being that of a machine. So much so that it's ultimately up to you if you feel like that you're the good guy or the bad guy in this situation. But by his very design and purpose, mankind's extinction was a result of the machine's constant need for blood, since people at some point may have no longer been willing to donate their blood for the machine's benefit. And so, in effect, machines like V1 resorted to murder for its own survival. This is what sets it apart from characters like the Doomslayer, where he's ultimately fighting for the good of humanity. V1 is merely fighting for its own self-preservation, even if it's at the expense of humanity, painting a picture that you may in fact be the bad guy after all. But since the story is yet to be finished, I can't go into any further detail until we see what happens. We'll all just have to wait for Act 3. Now, while the story and its setting has a really interesting premise so far, the real meat and potatoes is in its gameplay. Frankly, Ultrakill just doesn't hold you back. At all. You can jump any distance, leap far and wide, propel yourself at incredible speed, slide to your heart's content, slam the ground like a cannonball, and climb literally anything you want. You have the closest thing to total freedom in your movement, and the design of the layers gives you enough flexibility to go wild. The weapon roster is small compared to Doom Eternal, but they are way more dynamic in their utility and combo potential. In games like Enter the Gungeon and the Binding of Issac, the items tend to stack when used in conjunction, and their items are in the hundreds. In Ultrakill, the weapons don't neuter each other at all, and just give you more combo opportunities and different methods to racking up the style meter. You could just get by with the revolver and that's it, but then you'd be completely ignoring the deeper mechanics involved in its dynamic combo system that makes up for the small weapon roster. You have the revolver, the shotgun, the nail gun, rail cannon, and rocket launcher. All the variants of the 5 weapons themselves also add an extra layer into the mix. The marksman variant of the revolver is literally just flipping a coin and then shooting it, while the coin automatically beelines towards the nearest target. But why stop there? Why not whip out the rail cannon immediately after and then shoot the coins? You then get a bigger effect of the coin's power, and that's not even scratching the surface. The game is said to have 4 upgrades for each weapon once it's complete, and the number of combos that players have figured out already is insane. You can parry enemy projectiles, parry your own bullets, your own coins, stack coins in the air to shoot with the revolver or rail cannon, hook onto a big enemy while quick swapping at the same time, slam into the ground turning filth into paste, grapple small enemies towards you and then shoot them up close, bounce the projectile back with your own coin, and I'm still not even scratching the surface here. And let's not forget how fast and smooth the movement feels here. V1 is really fast, maybe just as fast as a character from Dragon Ball Z or The Flash, but either way, he's really fast, and you can dart around the arena in the blink of an eye, but the caveat is that he can die pretty easily if you're not moving enough. Your utility and mobility will be your best bets here, and the combo and weapon switching will also be another component you need to master if you want to survive. Admittedly, the enemies themselves aren't that smart, but their ability to kill you is also relative to how skillful you are at the game. If you're not moving, if you're not utilizing combos, airtime, and dynamic movement, then you'll die. Then you'll lose that P rank privilege. Speaking of which, part of the game's addicting element is the style meter and the scoring system. You rack up style through combos and weapon kills. The highest you can get is Ultrakill, and the highest rank you can obtain after completing a level is P rank, which you can only get when 4 criterias are in check. Your 3 scores which allocate towards time, kills, and style, and the 4th element is not dying of course. But since the levels are so replayable and relatively short, you can just play them over and over again until you're satisfied and until you get that P rank. I absolutely adore this game, and I insist that other fast-paced shooters follow this game's example, and not hold players back in terms of weapon experimentation and flexible movement. As I have said already, the game is still incomplete, but what's already there is fantastic, and it's ruined a lot of other shooters for me, making them feel slow and boring by comparison. As of late, I've seen other games taking the same sort of inspiration. Games like Voidborn and Dimensional Slaughter are taking a page from Ultrakill's book, and to be honest, I'm glad, because this game has the most dynamic sense of movement I've ever seen in a shooter, and makes you feel like the game is limitless in regards to how you want to play it. It's addictive, high octane, and punishing yet fun at the same time. Admittedly, from a graphical standpoint, it doesn't look very good, but everything animates like butter, and the set pieces are varied and are quite memorable. And Act 2 has been an absolute blast so far. Its visual presentation and addictive gameplay is so good that you'll generally ignore the retro style graphics anyway, which is something, if I'm being honest, I've never cared much for. But this game does allow customization towards its visuals. If the game doesn't look retro enough to you, you can always add in the PSX filters, which are actually quite suitable to the game's retro feeling. When all is said and done, at this juncture in the history of FPS gaming, Ultrakill is by and large the perfect fast-paced shooter, and the insane part is that it still doesn't feel like it's halfway finished. It has an interesting premise with incredibly stylized gameplay, a near infinite potential number of combos that can develop over time, some of the best boss fights I've seen in a shooter in quite a while that test your knowledge and skill to its fullest, and for fans of Devil May Cry 3, there's a surprise in there for you too. Also, the possible inclusion of custom scripting within the map editor will provide an insane degree of possible content for Ultrakill. You could have entirely new textures, animations, mechanics, even entire acts. This would be a wasted opportunity if it's not implemented. New Blood Interactive and the developers they support are producing nothing but black magic at this point. With Ultrakill, Amid Evil, Faith, and Dusk, I can only but hope that the gravy train continues forward. And now that Gloomwood had just released, I'll be looking forward to playing that as well at some point. Go play Ultrakill, and thank you for watching.
Forgive me, my children, for I have failed to bring you salvation from this cold, dark wood.